Hi and welcome back to the channel, and in today's episode we're going to try and kick a few goals on this forest weapon. So in the meantime, we have addressed the cooling issues. We have got the radiator in the car now, and we've gone for an aluminium radiator rather than the OEM plastic tank radiator, and there's nothing wrong with either of those. It was just cheaper and easier to get an aluminium one, so we fitted one up and that's in. We've also addressed the power steering cooling. Now, we could have used the factory power steering cooler lines, which is basically just a loop of aluminium pipe that sits in front of the radiator. They do work reasonably effectively. However, we've gone for an airflow unit in this particular case. It allowed us to terminate up the lines with airflow fittings for the Dash 6 fittings that we've used. We've also fitted in all the new return lines and everything, and that is all tidied up and done. So that is a tick off the list finally. We haven't got fluid in the lines yet. We've still got a couple of other bits and pieces to do. However, at least that part of it's done. So now we need to get on and tackle other things. So without further ado, let's keep going. Keeping with our aluminium theme, enter this. It is a nice little aluminium radiator expansion or overflow tank. We were going to use the factory OEM Subaru tank. However, we decided that a couple of reasons. One, Subaru mount the factory overflow bottle inside the inner arch on the left hand side of the car. So if there is some sort of knock to the left hand fender or in the front there, there is a chance that that bottle can be damaged. Also, it's not easy to clean it out or service it or get to it, and it also means having to have a pipe across the top of the radiator for the overflow from the expansion tank, which sits on the driver's side of the car and then runs all the way around. So instead we're trying to move everything and sort of consolidate it all, and so at the moment we are working out where we are going to mount this tank. Now we think the ideal place for it is going to be here, and the air filter setup will come down into this area here. Now there may be some of you thinking, well, hang on a minute, why don't we mount the overflow tank something like this up near the power steering tank, and then build a plate in there that will make a cold air box for the air filter. And it is a discussion that we've had, and it was something we were thinking about doing. However, it means a lot more fabrication to make up a plate and a bracket in here. Not that that's any major problem. However, it may be an issue if we need to, say, replace the spark plugs on a rally, because the spark plugs are down here on the engine, and generally speaking we've got to remove air filter and on the other side of the car the washer bottle to be able to get at spark plugs. And if we build a custom plate in here in effect to try and limit the amount of hot air that the air filter will suck in, then it will mean making it very difficult to replace the spark plugs and also get at anything on this side of the engine that we may need to during a rally. So instead, mounting this way is going to be a better and a faster option for us. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, hang on a minute, if there's an overflow of the coolant, well, that could end up in the air filter. Yes, that is a possibility. However, this has got a screw cap on it, so it should be well sealed. Also, we're going to run the overflow pipe outside, so that if the tank does overflow, it won't end up in the air filter at all. And on top of that, the air filter itself is actually going to, we've used this setup before where we use a sock or a wrap with our K&N air filters, and that is actually designed as hydrophilic to keep water out. So should any coolant get spilled on there, it'll help to keep coolant out of the intake. Now, somebody else was likely to raise, well, what about all the hot air then? Because we want to keep air as cool as possible entering the engine, and we're going to have, you know, hot air when we've got a radiator expansion tank and a power steering tank all, you know, in the area where the air filter would normally sit. And yes, that is a consideration. However, with the Subarus, first of all, the factory air pickup for the factory air box in a GC is actually behind the headlight. So air rushing in from behind the right hand side headlight actually feeds the air filter, and that will be no different in this particular case. Also, directly above where the air filter sits, so in this area here, the factory bonnet has vents in it already. So the air filter will be able to draw in cool air through that vent there from the top. Also, some air will come through around the radiator cowling and whatnot as well to get in there, and around the headlight. Now, having built quite a few of these GCs and used similar setups on a few of these cars, we know that this will work okay and we won't have any major catastrophes with it. That's the expansion tank in. It's a nice neat little tank there. All right, let's take a look at what we have done with the wiring just as a quick overview. So normally the factory fuse box sits here. Instead of that, because we're running a PDM, that's going to be inside the car. We'll show you that at a later point. We've got two breakers mounted up on a bracket here now, which kind of work like a fusible links, which are usually inside the fuse box anyway. The alternator wiring and things like that come to here, and then we will run the battery in the factory position, and so the battery will end up being connected to these breakers here, and then from these breakers here, the main power all runs back inside the car. We have retained the factory ECU wiring, so these are the factory ECU plugs. We have changed the location and direction of those wires, so they now come inside the engine bay rather than out through the inner or outer guards of the car. We have rewired the alternator wiring. There wasn't anything too spectacular about that to be done. Also, all the headlight wiring has been sorted. Now this, what looks like a mess here, this is the passenger side, left side of the car. It has fog light wiring, indicator wiring, park lights, headlight, which is there, and also the horn. That's all located in this area here. We are going to just drop the fog light wiring through, and it will be wired. The wiring will be in situ. We don't know whether we will actually use that wiring or not in future. If we've got a wet, foggy rally or something and we decide to install fog lights, well, the wiring will be there for that, so that'll be sorted. The factory thermo fans are wired up into there as well, but they are custom wiring to that. And then moving around to the driver's side where we've got a headlight temporary plugged in, same deal on this side, headlights, fog lights, indicators, park lights, etc. We have got all of the wiring tidied up. This is also more ECU factory wiring here. This has got the triggers in it for the cam and crank angle sensor. That's a factory position for it. And we have got it all through and tidied up into the all the other sensors. Things like the map sensor, which we've mounted. Of course, the boost control solenoid that we were installing in the last video, and then that all runs around. So some of it follows the factory route. There are still a few wires lying around. These are for inside, they're not engine bay, and we will tidy these up. These ones would be the factory sensors or switches. Say there's a neutral switch, the reverse light switch, and also an O2 sensor and speed sensor in there. Which are usually used in the car. They probably won't be utilised in this car because we're using GPS for speedo. We don't need an O2 sensor in this, and we don't need a reverse switch because that will be on a manual switch inside the car as well. However, the wiring is there, and we will utilise that or have that in place so that it's needed in the future. It's already tied into the loom, and as you can see, if we look down under here, that is, hopefully the camera is capturing that okay, that is the wiring, or some of the wiring loom going through already, and this is the custom stuff. Inside the car is where things get interesting. There is still a way to go. It may look like a complete mess, and it's not the tidiest where they're all laid out everywhere. However, there is a method to the madness here, and all of the wires are labelled. You can probably see that one there says coil positive, one down there says intercooler, sprayer, and then there's oil light and things like that. So we've still got to work out the route of some of these wires. We have started tidying some of them up. As you can see underneath these wires laying everywhere, the convoluted tube to the ECU. So all of that sort of stuff is all done already. Very shortly, once we've got the last of the wiring done for the wipers and the washers, we'll get inside and start making this all look a bit tidier, and then work out the PDM, get that all installed, and then we should be rocking and rolling to move forward. However, we still do need to do all of the rear wiring as well. We've identified all those wires there. We've got to bring them round and get them into position so that they can go into the PDM as well. So with our boards screwed in and our CAN bus shield clipped in on the top of our Arduino, that is the pretty much the electronics sort of sorted out. Then it comes down to doing some wiring connections. Now you may have seen in the background while I was doing that other stuff that there are we've got multicolored wires with all these other bits and pieces lying around here. These wires are called jumper wires. Not all shields or boards that can be connected to Arduinos clip onto the boards. Obviously the CAN bus one does nice and neatly. However, the relay board does not. So in this particular case, we use these jumper wires to connect them up. And there's a few different types of them for Arduinos and Raspberry Pis and whatnot. You've got ones that have got a pin on one end and a socket on the other end, and then ones with pins on both ends. They come in multi different colors, obviously. We're going to use these to connect from one side to the other. Now, it might not show up that well on the camera, but on the boards they have these little sockets, and you might be able to see there that the numbers are labeled. These are called pins, and effectively these pins are designated in the microcontroller, so on the chip, and allows the inputs and outputs to be programmed in the software for this. Now, if we use the example of, say, the Link ECU, which we're running in the car, and the expansion loom, effectively that's kind of like what this does. It's a very similar sort of setup. So the ECU does its ECU stuff, plus it can monitor, control and monitor a whole bunch of other bits and pieces. Well, that's kind of what these Arduinos are capable of. So where we have coloured wires and pins in the Link ECU and say the expansion looms, similar sort of setup with the Arduino. So let's say, for example, we'll pick, let's say, pin 45. We'll clip that into pin 45, and the other end of that we will plug into let's go pin number 2. So effectively what I've done is pin 2 on this relay board, by the way, corresponds to relay number 2 here. So say, for example, that we wanted to control the headlights. So we want to put low beam on in the headlights. So what would happen is, we'll just use another pin here. We'll go with, say, pin... We press the button to activate the headlights on our keypad. We designate pin 24 to receive the signal. It goes into the microcontroller to the Arduino. The Arduino says, yep, we've received a press button from pin 24, and our output is pin 45. So it comes in on 24, it goes out on 45, and that sends a signal to this relay board to activate relay number 2, and relay number 2 will then be wired to the headlights. Hopefully that made sense. Okay, and we're going to do that with all of the functions that this is going to control via our push button board, which we have to construct yet. And all of those inputs will come into the Arduino. Say to the Arduino, you've received a signal of this. With this signal, do this, output it to whatever it is that we want to do. Some of those signals will go out via CAN bus and be sent to the PDM to action, and some of those will be controlled by these relays here. So we've got a bit of wiring to do. We've got to work out all the pins and how we're going to connect them and what relays. We're going to designate what relays on here are going to do what. We should have a few spare relays on there. We're not going to need all of these. And effectively what will happen is once we've got all of these jumpers connected, and once we've got that sorted, by the way, we will need to fix these in place, probably with a spot of glue, super glue or something, so that they don't move and there's no chance that they can pop out, because there is a possibility that they could pop out of the board with vibrations. We don't want that to happen. We don't want to lose some functions for something so simple. We then need a way of getting these wiring out and connected to the car's loom, and that is where we have decided to use these types of connectors. Now there's a couple of different types. We could have gone with this one here, which is already pre-wired and terminated, and effectively these are quite a neat little unit. They clip in, they're sealed, and away you go, and they've got pigtails on them already. However, they're not going to be long enough to reach all the relays and bits and pieces, so we won't use these, but these will come in handy for future use with something else, another project that we've got. Instead, we're going to go for this type of scenario here. So basically what this is it's a male and a female plug. What will happen is that we will mount this side of the plug on the lid of the case, and then run the wiring inside and terminate them all in here, run all the wires that we need from the relay and inputs and whatnot through that. That'll be terminated in there, and then this side here will be terminated to the car's wiring loom, so we can plug in and locking bar to connect it. Okay, makes sense? Okay, through the magic of television, we have got some fabrication finished. So the external connector has been drilled and tapped and slotted for this, so it'll sit here on the wiring. Also for the Arduino board where the USB connects in and power, we won't be using the power, the port's pretty much the same. Trim the clearances so that will all sit neatly in that housing, and it'll be mounted. This will be towards the engine or the firewall, and this will be on the left side or the co-driver side of the tunnel, so that we can get access to all this to make it all work, and should we need to plug into it and interrogate it for some reason or check some programming or whatever, we can get at it. So that is the hardware pretty much mounted. There's still another step to go that we'll need to do at a later stage. The PDM is going to be mounted on top of here as well, and then we've got to mount this all in the car. Off camera we got all the rear wiring sorted and through to where it needed to be, and did all the terminations for all the wiring for the Arduino and for the Link Razor. Once we've got it all commissioned and tested, then we'll tidy it all up properly. Whilst doing all that, it was also time to turn this thing back into a car. So on with the fenders, bumpers, headlights, grille, park lights, etc., which does make it look a little more complete. Now, having said all that, there's still a long way to go. Originally, when we started the build on this car, we were going to get it out for the end of the 2023 season. That didn't happen, obviously, and we pushed it back to the start of this year's season. However, we couldn't make that date either, and then we've pushed it back again to the Forest Rally, which is now only a couple of weeks away, and we've realised we're just not going to make it. We've never had a car that's fought us so hard to be finished. We've basically taken one step forward and two steps back with almost everything we've done. Even just trying to fit the dump pipe to this thing. It was given to us, we went to bolt it on, we discovered that it had been cut and welded, probably for a rotated turbo, and it won't fit. So now we've got to sort that out. The list to get the car done in time for a rally is not insurmountable. We could do it, and we have done more in less time. However, we didn't want to go to a 2-day rally with an untested car and shakedown beyond stage 1. That's a recipe for disaster. So we've decided to push back the completion date and get this thing all sorted out. So it's probably going to be mid-season at the Grimwade Stages rally. Okay, so I think we'll end this video here. Thanks very much for watching. Hope you've enjoyed our progress on the Forest weapon. Please like, give us a thumbs up. It's important for the YouTube algorithm, and subscribe. And we'll catch you again soon. Cheers.